Hi, welcome to the ChicoBag podcast, where our goal is to make the world a better place and leave it better than we found it. I'm here with Jordan Parker. She's a visionary fashion producer and activist and founder of the Triveni Institute. Did I say it right? I think I did.
I say Triveni. You say Triveni. It's all good.
Triveni Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to disrupting power structures through art, sustainability, inclusivity, and they're based in Chicago. Jordan has produced groundbreaking fashion events, including most recently Trashin Revolution fashion shows and the Shadow Ball. So Jordan's work isn't just about fashion. It's about creating a movement where sustainability, self-expression, and activism collide. Jordan, welcome.
It's so great to be here. I'm so excited we're making this happen.
Yeah. So tell me about your fashion shows.
So they started 2 years ago, and I got a small grant to have a Trashin show. And I was thinking,
so what
most
is
of the
Trashin
shows.
Show? Wait a minute. You said Trashin show.
Trashin show.
So it's not
So
fashion.
Trashin show.
It's
not
trash
fashion. It's
plus
fashion.
Fashion. Yes. Okay. Trashin. Yes.
It's fashion made from trash.
Okay. Tell me more.
Yeah. So fashion made from trash. And I got a small grant. And so I was like, okay, we're doing this. And a lot of the Trashin shows that I had seen, were kind of like elementary schools and, like community centers. And that's great. But I really wanted to level this up to like Met Gala quality. And that wasn't actually my vision from the very beginning. From the very beginning, I was like, let's just do this. And then I saw these designs coming down the runway and I was like, this is huge. Met Gala quality. So we're branding this now as the future Met Gala of the climate crisis. And all of our designs are made from upcycled single-use plastic trash.
So what does it look like? Like, what does Met Gala look like? It sounds really sexy and glamorous. Is it?
Have you seen the Met Gala?
Yeah, it's all over the top. Like everyone's like, "What are you wearing?" And people, it's so.
That's exactly it. It's over the top. It's over the top.
So people listening to this, what can they Google to see images of what you are talking about?
Triveni Institute. So Triveni Institute.
Yeah.
Trashin Revolution.
And so you can see.
So it's Trashin spelled like fashion. So
yes.
Trashin. Trashion. And a bunch of images will come up. And also our Instagram. Our Instagram is the best place to go.
Okay. So Instagram. All right. So what's the goal? So you're doing this Trashin show. What are you trying to achieve?
We're trying to change the narrative around how we talk about these environmental issues because, let's be honest, up to this point, it's been kind of granola, Birkenstocks. I love Birkenstocks, but it just hasn't been very cool, very sexy to talk about environmental issues. So that was one of the goals is like, let's make this fun. Let's make it sexy. Let's make it cool to care about the planet. And let's invite people to a big party and talk about really serious issues, existential issues, and make it fun so that people can lean into these really heavy topics more easily.
And do you like when you're having these events and with that intention, like what kind of conversations are people having? Like what surprised you? Like what tell me a little bit more about the interactions at these events.
Well, the events are super cool because we do a lot of cross-community work. So we have the fashion community there, of course, people from that fashion community, people from nonprofit world, people from for-profit world, people from politics. We have people from every sector. So when you walk into one of our shows, you can't really pigeonhole it. Like, oh, this is a political event or this is a fashion show. Like, it's just so many different people from different communities together. So that alone is going to lend itself to really interesting conversations and people being exposed to things that they would never be exposed to otherwise. And that's exactly what we want. So we talk about a lot of different things. We talk about the environment, of course, but we also talk about gender diversity and racial justice and a lot of like late stage capitalism, right? Like we're all entrenched in this system right now. And
So
so we
what
talk
did you
about
say?
these things.
What kind of
Late
capitalism?
stage late stage capitalism.
Late
So
stage capitalism. Tell me about that.
basically the stage of capitalism where capitalism has gone off the rail and
Okay.
we have these billionaires who are launching rockets up into space for joyrides while the rest of the world burns. So that's late stage capitalism. Elon Musk
Okay.
is late stage capitalism.
Got it. Okay. So
Yeah.
this is the idea that the gap between the wealthy and the poor is getting bigger, right? And is that part of it?
Yeah, yeah. And there's this mythology around infinite growth, right?
Yes.
That these, the economies have to keep growing and growing and growing. It makes no sense on a finite planet. So at this point, we're
Yeah.
consuming the resources that
Yeah.
4 planets would provide sustainably.
Yeah.
And we just have this one planet.
I've been pondering this idea, right, of like GDP and growth, and and it in a traditional business, you have your income statement, which shows your revenue and your income, and then you got your balance sheet, which shows your assets and your liabilities. And I feel like we're missing the balance sheet when we talk about growth and the economy, because the
Mm-hmm.
balance sheet, there's a bunch of assets, and I would call them ecological assets that are providing services that, are valuable, that, aren't really being captured, aren't being appreciated, aren't being, treasured, and they're being depleted. So,
Mm-hmm.
our balance sheet's looking really bad right now as a global society. And, but no one's talking about it. We're just going for growth. Oh, the income statement looks great. Oh, we're growing, we're growing, we're growing. Yet, the underpinnings of all of this that supports all of this is going to go bankrupt. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents. Like when you say this is what comes to my mind. So tell me more
Yeah.
about
Well, I
like,
wanted to say people are talking about it, but they're
okay.
not the people in power.
Oh, well, tell me
Lots
what
of
you
people are
know.
talking about it, but they're not, but the people in power, the people who are running the world right now are not talking about it.
Yeah.
And I'm actually really curious about what happened to Elon Musk because he started Tesla and I used to work
Yeah.
for Tesla actually.
Oh, yeah.
And he was all about, moving the world, transitioning the world to sustainable energy, right? To
Yeah.
cleaner energy. And it's an electric car company. And they moved into, the solar roof and, solar panels. And I was schlepping around Home Depot at one point, like selling solar. So that's what I was doing for Tesla. I actually had a really good time. But somewhere along the way, he flipped. And now he's on Joe Rogan saying, you can eat as much meat as you want. It's not going to make a difference. And it's like, you're a really smart guy. You have to know that that statement is false. That just factory farming meat and eating as much meat as you want is going to make a difference.
Well,
I don't know what happened to him.
well, Elon Musk as well as Jeff Bezos, they both have the goal of colonizing another planet because we essentially are outstripping the ability of this
Mm-hmm,
planet to support life. So they have a
mm-hmm.
plan B instead of like focusing on plan A. I think that's where their head is like, there's no hope. So
Yeah,
you might as well, let's build some rockets and colonize Mars and we'll start over. But
yeah,
Mars kind of
yeah,
sucks. I don't think anyone wants to live there.
yeah. It's
It's
not a
nothing
Hollywood
compared.
movie.
Yeah. So let's get back to your fashion show.
Okay.
So you have this intersection, right? You got fashion. You also, focus on diversity.
Hmm.
and inclusion. So tell me about it, because DEI right now, we talk about like what's happening currently, is the boogeyman getting shut down all across the United States. Like DEI is evil. However, you're focusing on diversity, inclusion, and equity in your fashion show. So why is it important? Why should people care about DEI?
Yeah, yeah, good question. Well, if people don't care about DEI, then they care about the status quo and the current power structures that be, and that's obviously really problematic, right? So, like if you don't care about diversity and equity and inclusion, what do you care about?
Well, I think, most people say I care about my family. I care about putting food on the table. I care about, these things, being safe, right? So
Right.
what benefit does diversity, like I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. So
Yeah.
what benefit does diversity, provide? Like what's in it for the average person to care about diversity?
They care about diversity. Um, well, one thing that we do um, at our shows is we cast our model cast very intentionally. So we want to have all of humanity walking the runway. We cast for gender diversity. So 40% of our cast is TGNC, so trans and gender nonconforming. We
Okay.
cast for age diversity, racial diversity, experience diversity, and body diversity. And it's really important to not only have representation, but to show that all of these different humans need to have a voice.
Yeah.
And so when you only have a small segment of humanity that actually has a voice and is running everything, you're going to miss out on so much knowledge, so much art, so much depth in the human experience. And so that's one reason, just off the top of my mind. Also, is just ethical, right?
Hmm.
That everyone has a seat at the table, that everyone has a voice, that everyone has the same amount of power. We've never had that in the history of the planet, but
Yeah.
it makes sense, right? That would give humanity the best the best future in our evolution to have all of those voices and all of that diversity at the table.
Yeah. I look at nature for inspiration, and when you have a diverse ecosystem, where plants, you have a variety of plants, a variety of animals. If some pest or fungus comes in, it's not going to just devastate the whole landscape.
Mhm.
It will devastate, a small portion of the landscape. And then a lot of times the cure for whatever is happening is right next to the item that's being impacted. So
Mhm.
that's the beauty of nature, is a lot of times these plants and organisms somehow work together to fight off, to be stronger together, right? So when we look at nature,
Mhm.
that together we're stronger than, by ourselves. It makes a lot of sense. Like diversity, when you don't have diversity in nature, you have catastrophe. So why are we not taking that lesson and realizing that in our human experience that the same is true? Like,
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great parallel. And we are nature. All of
what do you mean? We're
humanity
not
is nature.
separate? We're not separate from nature?
No, contrary to popular opinion, we are not. We are animals. We are part of nature. And that's part of the problem too, is that we
Yeah.
see ourselves. Speciesism is directly related to racism and sexism. And that's a big theme of everything that we're doing.
Wow. So that's, that it's interesting because, as humans, we like to think we're different. We're not part of all that, animal stuff, but,
We're above it.
um, yeah, like we're above it. It's not, but, yeah, it's interesting to think about, that we
The
are.
world is our dominion. We have been given the world.
Yeah.
It's ours to do what we want to. with it. Yeah, that mindset is
Yeah, well, that
really,
goes
really
back.
problematic.
It goes back for thousands of years. That idea.
Mhm.
That this is ours for the taking. The resources for us. Um,
Mhm.
Without really a thought of our responsibility to those who are not at the table. And when I think about diversity and inclusion, I think about future generations who aren't here, who don't have a voice, that we're not, considering in our decisions today. So when we destroy a part of nature that cannot be replaced, we're taking that from a future generation that could, benefit and enjoy that, and, ultimately needs that, to sustain
Mhm.
life, so
Mhm.
yeah, so diversity is important.
If
And
you
you talk
if you just
about,
yeah.
oh,
Well,
I was
I was gonna say
go ahead.
one thing, add
Yeah.
one thing. Um, if you look at the people who are anti DEI,
Yeah.
who are those people? They're white, they're
Yes,
privileged,
generally.
they're
Yeah.
they're able. Um, what other things would you say are those people who are anti DEI?
I don't know, and I'd hate to generalize, but yes, I think generally it's, I'm a white male, so I'm part of this privileged class of, the world is kind of tilted in my favor, and
Mhm.
I've had to recognize that, my experience is totally different than somebody else's. I don't have the same obstacles or biases or, that other people have. So it's
Mhm.
hard for
Mhm.
me to get out of my own experience to really empathize and see someone else and their experience. It's challenging, but I really applaud you for bringing all these different types of people together to interact in a fun environment, in an environment where people are smiling and laughing, having a good time, and we get to know each other. And then, like,
Mhm.
these boogeymen, that are demonized, are actually really fun people to be around. And when we all get to know each other a little bit, then it's like it takes that stigma out of things, I think.
It's been a huge gift to me. I mean, the people that I've been involved with,
Yeah.
from models to designers to the people working in the production team, um, politicians, all of our sponsors, like just the the variety, the diversity of people is just it's been a
Yeah.
massive gift. If if we didn't want a reflection of humanity in our shows, they would suck. They would be terrible shows. So the diversity is everything. It's truly
That's what makes it
everything.
interesting, right? You're just like,
Well,
it's
yeah.
unexpected. It's exciting. It's like, oh, like what's, it's opens up ideas and questions. And
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just hearing other people's life experiences, and what you just referenced before is it's really hard to see our own privilege
yeah,
because you've just been in it your whole life. It's just the
yeah,
way the world is, right? And so it's really difficult to to see something when you're in it. And
yeah.
so when you have people with other backgrounds and life experiences than you around you and you listen, you start to become aware of your own reality like so
Yeah.
much faster. And it's really, really important. And that's probably why a lot of people are anti DEI. I hate putting a label on it because
Yeah.
it should be just the way things are. But I think that's why a lot of people are anti DEI because they don't want to look at themselves and they don't want to lose their power and privilege.
Yeah. And it seems when I hear people speak about it that there's some guilt that, or shame, or they feel like they're being shamed or guilted, for who they are based on their
Hmm.
history, for example. which is, how do you overcome, that barrier that people get kind of caught up in, like, oh, I'm proud to be an American. Our American history, is this, this is what I was taught, and now you're talking about someone else's view of American history that isn't in the textbooks, that isn't what I was taught in school, like that. I don't want to hear that. That makes me feel bad about my heritage, or my background, or what's that mean about me, or as an American. Like, how do you get beyond that conversation where people are like, yeah, I watched a PBS series called We Shall Remain. It is the history of America through the Native American experience.
Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting because our history books don't talk about all this. It's very much from the colonial European, perspective, of
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
happened. And, and there, of course there's a history of, what happened to the Native Americans is, with Manifest Destiny and all that, of course, but the story is so much deeper and richer than what we were ever told.
Mm-hmm.
So in your
I was
opinion,
told, yeah, go
I mean,
ahead.
you've done a lot of work in this. Like, how do you bring people along? How do you let them feel good while at the same time helping them not get defensive about the real history?
How do I help white people feel better if their ancestors were slaveholders or slave
Yes.
masters? I don't.
Yes.
That's just
Yeah.
something they have to deal with.
Okay.
I mean, I mean, like revisionist history is a thing. It absolutely is, and um, I no one teaching history that is not through a colonist lens is saying um, you need to you need to feel ashamed about this history. Everyone teaching history from different viewpoints is saying this is what really happened to us. This is our history. There are always two different sides of the story, or 1,000 different sides of the story, right? And we've just been told one side.
Mhm.
I remember when I was a little kid, we were taught that the Native Americans and the Pilgrims had a nice, happy Thanksgiving dinner together, and they were all friends, kumbaya, right? Like
Yeah.
we weren't taught about what really happened, and there's some really, really ugly, atrocious stuff in our country's history.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's important to learn about it and to expand your mind, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just it yeah, it's I'm having a hard time answering the question like why is DEI important because I'm like, well, duh. Like that's kind of I mean it's a good question. It's a really good question because it's like helping me like actually verbalize why like the argument and you're right like there is a huge pushback right now against DEI and of course gender diversity, right? And climate. I mean if we were
Yeah.
receiving federal funding we would be screwed right
Yeah.
now based on what we're doing. Um so yeah, no, I appreciate the question. It's I haven't ever been asked that before. Um, but I yeah, I mean the power structures that that be right now, um, I mean they have a certain way of operating, this
Yeah.
this culture. And it's, some people are really happy with that and they're like, let's make America great again. Let's go back to the 60s. Let's go back to the 1800s. Like let's go back in time. That was safer for our little segment of the world. But that's not the majority of us. And every human, now I feel like I'm preaching, but like every single human should have a chance to be who they want to be.
Yeah.
Without being told they have to get into a box. They don't have certain rights.
Yeah.
They, they aren't going to have as many opportunities as someone else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, but it's a good question. Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, speaking of boxes, right? So there's the idea of, gender roles, and right now that's a big conversation of like you're either a man or you're a woman.
Yeah.
It's and you use pronouns that are they them,
Yep.
and I'd like to hear, like, from your experience, what your thoughts are on gender in general. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
help me
Yeah. Thank you.
educate and help educate the listeners, because I think this is an interesting topic. A lot of people, I think, are confused. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't know a lot about it. It's scary. And then you talk about sports, and that sounds unfair. I don't want my daughter competing against a man, and that's scary. So, like, can you break it down in a way that everyone listening can understand more fully what this topic is all
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. I'm really glad you asked that question. It's so relevant. Concerning like what's happening in human evolution right now and what's happening in our government right now and in this culture right now. So um, I started using they them pronouns a while ago, and everyone has a personal reason why they identify as one gender or another. But going back to just kind of the basics around gender, and one of the reasons why I started using they them pronouns exclusively is when a baby's born, they have a biological sex. So they're either male, female, or they're intersex. And intersex babies are really common. I heard they're as common as redheads, like natural redheads. So an intersex child is when they have ambiguous genitalia. So their biological sex is not neatly male or female. So they're intersex. And traditionally those intersex babies have been forced to conform. The typically white male doctor has said, okay, you're going to raise this child as a boy because it seems like your child's like mostly a boy, or mostly a female. So you're going to choose. That's highly problematic. But when it comes to gender, gender is not your biological sex. Gender is how you identify as male, female, maybe non-binary, meaning both. You're fluid in between genders, or neither. You don't identify as either. And there's so many different types of gender expression that someone can develop as they age and they become more of who they are. So when you assign a gender at birth according to genitalia, then you're basically saying like, okay, this genitalia is going to predict who this person is, how they dress, like all of the like the social expectations around gender. And it's always traditionally up to this point been a gender binary. You're either male or you're female. You're a girl or you're a boy. You're a woman or you're a man. And you also have to present that way, right? Like there are certain rules. You have to wear certain clothing. You can't wear other clothing. Like men can't wear skirts. Women have to wear makeup and do their nails. There are all of these expectations around gender and how that is performed. So that gender binary is highly restrictive, and it also keeps the power structure intact. That, patriarchy intact. So you're either a boy or you're a girl. And the problem with that is there are a lot of problems with that. There are a lot of problems with that. A lot of people don't conform to one of those little boxes. So there's a lot of suffering. A lot of people, were assigned male at birth, but they feel like they identify more as girls and vice versa, or non-binary in between. Um, so the power structure that I'm talking about, the gender binary, right? One of the reasons why I started exclusively using they, them pronouns is because I want to take a stand against the gender binary and say we need to dismantle this power structure where there are girls, there are boys, you have to behave certain ways, you have to do certain things, and you have certain doors open to you, other ones are closed, and that's the way the world works. What was that?
Oh, sorry, it's my phone.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it was an alarm. Um, and and so it that gender binary keeps the male power structure intact, and it also um, gives us a gives us an excuse to exploit the planet as well when we gender the planet as female and mankind as male, or God as male. So if we disrupt that, if we say, okay, your gender is different from your biological sex, right? Your biological sex is the genitalia, the sex organs you were born with, but your gender is something different. Your gender is something you can choose, and you can express that the way that you want. If we disrupt that binary system, then it dismantles the power of the patriarchy. And that's, I think, one reason why so many people are against having this fluidity with gender. And when it comes to, like I said, the planet, Earth Day was just a couple days ago. Yeah, just yesterday. Earth Day was just yesterday, and I heard a lot of rhetoric about Mother Earth, right?
Yeah.
Earth is female, and mankind can dominate the Earth,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah, I'm hearing that.
if we gender the planet as female, it makes it a lot easier to exploit the planet in that gender binary.
Hmm.
So that's probably, I don't know if I did a good job really
Yeah.
explaining it, because it is it is complicated, but the number one thing is your biological sex you arrive on this planet with as a baby
Yeah. Yeah.
does not dictate your gender. It does not dictate who you become, who you
Yeah.
identify as. And if everybody's allowed, if every baby is allowed to express their gender in the way that they want, masculine, feminine, non-binary, you blur those lines between male and female. And then you disrupt that power structure that keeps men in charge and women subservient. And there's a lot of like I'm looking at our federal government right now, and um you see a lot of like women being lifted up, on the right. And from my vantage point, there's no mistake that the men are in control, and they're just giving the women the power. So the women are not actually on the same level as the men.
Yeah.
The men are still in control, and they're saying, well, you can be press secretary or you can have this position, but we're giving it to you. You're not equal, but we're allowing you to have some power.
Yeah. So, I mean, these kinds of gender roles, have gone back hundreds, thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think about there is biology that is involved where, men can biologically, go to work and we don't get pregnant. And so we don't have to step out of work to, to give birth, which gives us an advantage biologically where we don't
Mhm.
have that. We don't have to take care of a child, in its, first months. And I believe that that's part of it, right? Is that kind of part of this power dynamic that happens where men, have had this role of being the hunters and the breadwinners, and the women have been, the caregivers, and this kind of biological dynamic between men and women have kind of embedded itself into our society, into our social structures, into our roles, to the
Mhm.
point
Mhm.
where how do you disrupt that when you can't fully disrupt the biology that's happening and the reproduction of humans? It's like,
Mhm.
um I mean, that's one thought. Okay. So the other thought is language, right? So we have a whole language built around masculinity and femininity. We
Mhm.
talk about Mother Earth. I know, like in Spanish, the word for victim is not a masculine word; it's a feminine word, and there is no masculine
You mentioned
equivalent
that.
for victim, right? So
Mhm.
the way that I'm so, language is so powerful because it also puts us into boxes, right? Because like in some languages they have like 100 different words for seaweed, but in English, you're like, oh, seaweed, or in snow, Eskimos have all these words for snow. And,
Mhm.
we don't have the vocabulary to express exactly this non-binary world that you're explaining.
That's right.
Um, so the
Not
pronouns you're
yet.
using are they, them, which I think for a lot of people is confusing because we talk about one person or more than one person. Is there an opportunity to create some new words, maybe just non-binary pronouns that don't, that are singular, not plural,
Yeah.
that represent a person, not their gender?
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that a lot. That like this grammatically doesn't make sense. Am I referring to a bunch of people or just one person? So yeah, I think there's absolutely space in the English language, certainly the Spanish language as well, because that is much more gendered than our language. And it's that binary again. There's nothing in between. It's male or it's female. So there's absolutely room for language to evolve. And language is always evolving,
Yeah.
right?
So we're just at the
So
beginning
yeah.
of, if this is a revolution where the power dynamic, the patriarchy is is being disrupted, and we are creating a more equitable world where women and men both have power. And it just seems like we just don't have the vocabulary yet to embody this. And the other thing that's coming to mind is hormones, right? So you're talking
Mhm.
about genitalia, you're talking about identity, but then there's also hormones, right? So I
Yeah.
know a lot of men that are very feminine, and I know a lot of women that are very masculine. And then I think in our everydays, like we can kind of go from masculine to feminine, in the way that we express ourselves. And some
Mhm.
people are, if you look at a spectrum between, testosterone and estrogen, there's people on that spectrum, and regardless of their gender,
Mhm.
so how does that all play into this?
Yeah, I mean, you're describing a world, where
Yeah.
people go in and out of feminine, masculine. We all have those different parts of ourselves and everything in between, right? And we should be able to be fluid like that if we choose to. Like these really rigid gender roles are
Yeah.
hurting everyone. They do keep society in a certain structure. That's for sure. Especially, well, like from birth, really. Like there are gender reveal parties. My infant's gonna have a penis. Let's celebrate. Blue balloons.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loathe gender reveal parties, especially anything that involves balloons. But um, from from the utero,
Yeah.
we assign a gender, and that means certain things, and that that is going to dictate how we treat that child. And
Yeah. What kind of
what if we
toys we're
just,
going to give them?
what kind of toys, how we're going to talk to them, if we're going to be
Yeah.
like, you're so pretty, or like, oh, you're so tough.
Yeah.
You're such a tough boy. Oh, you're such a pretty girl. You know, we're
Yeah.
we're we do that stuff from birth. And so
Yeah.
what if we didn't do that? What if we didn't gender humans? What I mean, they of course they have biological sexes, and
Yeah.
that's medical information. Sure, but what if we didn't gender everything? And there are so many messages that come through from birth about who we are, what we can and should be, that are
Hmm.
prescribed in that gender binary. What if we just treated every body as a body? It's not gendered. And if you want to be feminine, be feminine. If you want to be masculine, be masculine. If you want to be that in the same 5 minutes, be that. Like, we're not going to gender people. You
Yeah.
decide who you're going to be. And every human gets the same consideration and the same treatment. I mean, that's of
Yeah.
course the utopia. We're nowhere near that. But I think that the gender diversity movement, um, that has been led by trans and gender nonconforming soldiers, pioneers for hundreds and hundreds of years, really.
Yeah.
But um, now these brave people out front are able to exist a little bit more than they used to be, and
Yeah.
like our government right now is trying to roll that back. Right? Let's pretend these people don't exist. Let's
Which I
make
imagine
them
is just
conform.
incredibly painful. Like when we think about people and humans and their experience and sense of belonging and value, it's got to be probably the most painful time, right? Like I
Yeah.
when you think about that, it's just like, oh well, what is the problem, right? I can understand it. It's some I was thinking about sports, right? So I know a lot of people get all caught
Mm.
up in the sports of transgenders competing in sports, and I was thinking, there's some women with a ton of testosterone. There's some
Mhm.
men with a ton, with a lot of like less testosterone, right? So why don't we just
Mhm.
compete divisionally based on how much testosterone you have? Instead of
Mhm.
having women's sports and men's sports, let's just do a biological, like, what's your testosterone level? Okay, you're in this
Mm.
league. you know
Yeah.
um I,
It
I
might
always
be
just
it
wonder
might
because
be
I know that's a
yeah.
sticking point. That's a sticking point for the movement. And I know a lot of people have a lot of problems with that idea that it's not fair.
I mean, that I don't have the answers for that. I don't think many people do. That's a really, really tough question.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to how you're treated socially, how you're treated in school,
Yeah.
like any other area of society, we should just be treated as people. We shouldn't be gendered. But when it comes to physical competition, and I was an athlete in high school, and then I was a triathlete as an adult.
Yeah.
Um, so I understand that argument. I really do. And what to do about it? Um, I was actually talking to my therapist about this a couple weeks ago, and she said in college, um, trans athletes are required to have medically transitioned for at least 4 years, I believe. And I shouldn't. I shouldn't quote her because I'm not exactly sure what the facts are with that, but some system like that, like so say someone was assigned male at birth. That's what this is all about for the most part. People assigned male at birth who transition to women and then compete in women's sports, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really not the other concern, like assigned female at birth, you know, a assigned female or AFAB person competing as a boxer, you know, for
Yeah.
example. Although that was just like a big snap, a big controversy. But anyway, um, so they they would require that assigned male at birth, that trans woman,
Hmm.
to have medically transitioned hormonally for 4
Yeah.
years.
So it comes back to
And
the
so
hormones, right?
yeah, yeah, so like she would have to be um on estrogen
Yeah.
and like medically transitioning, which means her T would be lower.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I think there's something there
Yeah.
potentially. There's something around a third category because like as we move beyond the gender binary, which we slowly are despite all the resistance,
Yeah.
um, you know, we're opening up more options to just
Yeah.
being a human, right? So maybe there would be a third and a fourth category for competition at some point in the future rather than just male, female. That's it. You
Well,
got to be
it's such
one.
a hard, such a dividing line in our society. Every form you fill out, you're male or female. The bathrooms, male or female. Even if they're individual private bathrooms, right? You still like you
Right,
cannot share a bathroom, even if it's a private bathroom. Why? I don't
right.
know why. Because men like pee on the seat. Is that the reason? I don't know. But it's but there's some dirty, messy women too. So I've
I've been in some gross. I'm thinking of the karaoke bar that I go to here in
Yeah,
Chicago,
well,
and
let's not
like those
digress there.
bathrooms
So,
are rank.
yeah. So, yeah, so thank you for talking about this because this is educational, I think, for me and for people listening that, this is, I think a controversial topic for a lot of people. And it's definitely, one of those things that it's almost political. It's
It's a
almost
very, it's
religious, don't talk about religion or
very,
politics. You know,
yeah. No,
but
I'm glad you
I
brought it
like to
up.
study, huh?
I'm glad you brought it up. I really
Yeah.
am glad you wanted to talk about it because it's it to your point, like it's just we have been in a gender binary for all of human history. You know, I mean
Yeah.
that has been
Well,
that's been the that's been our
it's,
reality, and so it's really hard for people to be like, wait, like so for example, if someone looks at me, like I present as a female,
yeah.
I present, you know, someone look at me and be like, okay, she probably has a vagina, right? Like,
Yeah.
but very few people actually know what my body is like. And I don't think it's important information. It shouldn't impact how people treat me.
Yeah.
So like I don't want to be gendered. I look the way I look, but I don't want people to immediately say, "Oh, she, you are a
Yeah.
female and we're going to treat you as a female." I'd rather just
Yeah.
be treated as a human.
Yeah. So I look forward to I think our language catching up
Mhm.
with to give the right words, I think, to the expression that people want. And then not saying that the words are wrong, but I'm saying there's probably there's a big opportunity here. And then through history and through nature, there is this gender fluidity. It's happened throughout nature, throughout history. if you look at it.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's all kinds of examples in nature where this happens. There's in all kinds of
Mhm.
examples through history, where it's completely acceptable and fine. You think about kabuki, in Japan, for example, and it's like everyone, goes, and it's a great time, to go watch kabuki, and no one's, protesting out front. It's not a big deal, and there's space in the culture, and it's cherished and prized, right? So we all can, when we talk about diversity, all these things are fun, great ways to explore and to recognize, people who are different, because it makes life a lot more interesting. So thank you for sharing about all that. And, I
It was
applaud the
probably a little
work you're doing.
convoluted.
What we talked about.
Was my explanation a little convoluted about about gender and like my viewpoint on it?
I mean, it's not an easy thing to really, in the framework of our language, in the framework of our society, it's just, it is something that's a little clunky, just naturally, I think,
Yeah.
because we don't have, we're in the system trying to talk about something that's not the system, and it's hard.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right. So, anyways, there's room for all these different variables and varieties of people in our life and in our world. And I applaud you, making your fashion show a forum to expose people to different ways of thinking, to celebrate diversity, to celebrate our earth and some of the issues that it's facing as far as, waste and, and making the issue beautiful and fun. So thank you so much for your efforts. And
Yeah.
I hope people get inspired to learn more about their neighbors and people in their community and put themselves into situations like your trash and show, where they can learn and expose themselves to different ideas that aren't their own.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for creating ChicoBag.
Yeah,
I
of
use those
course.
every day.